A foggy night in a cobblestone tower. A man paces in a dimly lit room, wondering if they're living, dead, or worse. There is a mysterious planet hurtling towards them, and a strange spacecraft glowing in the marshes. The movie is The Man from Planet X, and this is The Night Shift. Now, on the surface, The Man from Planet X comes across as your typical B-movie alien invasion schlock, though it's got a lot going for it. Released in 1951, it predates the B-movie monster madness, which populated Cold War-minded drive-ins throughout the mid-50s to late 60s, when William Castle's antics gave way to Roger Cormania, making this film a trendsetter of sorts. Though given the expressionist style of Shadow, Fog, and some other nifty cinematography, as well as Ulmer's credentials, I'm inclined to consider this a late entry into the golden age of horror, best defined by the likes of Todd Browning and the Universal Monsters, respectively. In fact, had this come out of Universal Pictures, it would probably be the coda to the collections featuring Dracula, The Mummy, and The Frankenstein, assuming you'd still want to include The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which, despite its virtues, comes across as the bottom-feeding popcorn fare fated for The Man from Planet X, and Ulmer's other films, but I digress. Our film stars Robert Clark as John Lawrence, Raymond Bond as Professor Elliot, Margaret Field as Enid Elliot, and William Schallert as Dr. Mears. Though you may know Schallert best as Niels Barris from Star Trek's The Trouble with Tribbles. For me, Dr. Mears is the highlight. The way he skulks and plots, and you really get that from his performance. Every time this guy's on the screen, you can tell his mind's racing, trying to work out all the angles on his latest con. And with a film full of sterile do-rights, you need a villain like Mears to keep things interesting. The monster is never enough. I've always found myself rooting for the uptight schemers in these sorts of films, and even though I get why they need to lose, this is Hollywood escapism after all. So long as the film treats them with the respect they're due, and not make them a mustache twirler or a punching bag, then I'm on board. And anything less is just insulting to you, me, and the medium. So we pan in from the foggy night to our hero brooding in an old Gothic-style tower known as Brock's, which, incidentally, was built as a defense against Viking raiders. A lovely little bit of foreshadowing. Anyway, our hero is inside pacing and talking to himself in echo, so you know this will be one big flashback. The movie really begins when John visits the local scientician and learns that there's an heretofore unknown free-floating planet which will be approaching Earth in 3 weeks. And since he's a journalist and this is quite a scoop, he goes to Bury, Scotland to see his old friend who made the discovery. And apparently this is the place to be. When the planet grazes the Earth, it'll be hovering over Scotland. After some decent exposition via characterization, they come across their first clue. A lightweight metal thing which they'd immediately determine came from the planet X. They debate whether it's a bomb or just a probe without coming to any real conclusion. For my money, I'd say it was a grappling hook. So then our plucky female lead discovers some ominous flashing in the marshes. Upon closer investigation, she discovers a rather impressive-looking spaceship given the time and budget. We get a build-up, and then...
When I got close enough to look in, there it was.
It? What?
That face, right on the other side of the glass, looking right into mine. I was terrified.
Face? A human face?
A ghastly caricature, like something distorted by pressure. And I ran. Really frightened, I guess, for the first time in my life.
I can't decide whether this is goofy or awesome. I mean, look at that. Have you ever seen anything like that? It's very striking. So as is B-movie trope, the fair sex screams and flees the Eastern Isle ahead and gets a man to come back with her. Hey look, there's Dr. Mears skulking in the back. And after much hullabaloo, they meet the alien who's got a gun.
This is a universal gesture, maybe it'll work.
And after the universal gesture for I give up, the alien collapses. Turns out he forgot to turn his faucet on and he's suffocating. They save his life and he follows them. So we cut to the dungeon where, after a long discussion, Mears decides he's going to communicate with it using geometry.
You have found a means of communication, Doctor?
Yes.
What?
common denominator, Professor. The basic and universal language. Geometry.
By George, Doctor, you've hit it.
Harebrained or no, they leave to let Mr. Mears give it a shot, and... well, that's how I learned my shapes. God, listen to that noise, that electronic theremin scream. That has to be the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. So the man from Planet X escapes, and people start disappearing, and the constable has come to investigate, but this isn't a mad scientist movie, and there ain't no bodies in the basement. So once the constable learns what kind of movie he's in, we get the big town meeting with the village mob.
Gardy, what ails you, man? Act like you've seen a ghost or something.
A ghost? No. Something of flesh and blood. Yet of neither. Horrible, monstrous creature with a head as big as two men put together. A skin with the shine of a new shilling. And eyes that are no better than a dead codfish.
Wait a minute.
So at this point, our heroes decide it's time to call in the army. And while they're working on that, there's a montage of panic and people getting abducted. It would be fairly eerie if it wasn't for the unfortunate music choices. I didn't mention it before, but in an earlier encounter with the alien, it beams a light at Professor Elliot and effectively zombifies him. This establishes the later reveal that the alien is abducting townsfolk and turning them into slaves to get his ship repaired. Now, cheap manual labor is not the best payoff to an alien abduction flick, but it makes sense, and in a movie where they want to keep the alien a morally ambiguous character, it helps keep a decent balance between ominous and reasonable. So now we reach the end of our wraparound. John is brooding in a candle-lit tower. The town is under the psychic control of an invading alien whose home planet is hurtling towards the Earth. Will the army arrive in time? Will the townspeople be freed? Yes, and yes.
What's his appearance here mean? He's establishing a wireless directional beam to his planet. At midnight, when the planet is at its closest approach to Earth, an invasion will be launched.
Why?
Why? It comes from a planet that's dying. It's turning to ice. If his people do not escape from the planet before it swings back along its route through space, they will be doomed.
How'd they get so close to Earth?
They managed to make the planet deviate from its natural orbit by scientific degravitation.
What was that object Enid and I found on the moors?
It's a magnetically powered rangefinder used to determine the composition of the Earth's atmosphere. It was sent out in advance of the spaceship for experimental purposes.
And how does he keep you a slave to his will?
By exposing us to a ray.
Okay, so we all got that? We're all clear? Good. So after that bit of exposition dump, Mears makes an attempt to save the alien. Now the motivations for this are odd. Even if we believe that he's doing it for science, it's really out of character for him. Maybe it was just a way to kill off a character the audience was supposed to hate. Maybe it was a way to give pathos to a villain, and a rare attempt at telling morally ambiguous tales in a genre known for atomic monsters whose existence is solely defined by growling, smashing buildings, and dying. But it's all a matter of how much faith you place in Ulmer as a movie maker. Me, I give him the benefit of the doubt. So the villains are gone, the aliens decide not to bother Scotland anymore and zoom by in some decent for that era special effects. And the film ends with a Kirk and Spock style "What did we learn today?" summary. I have to say I really enjoyed this one. I don't know if it's the director's style, the charisma of the actors, or just the lunacy of the premise, but everything just works. It's a very ambitious film considering the budget. I mean, an alien race flies their planet towards Earth for an invasion. Wow. Though you have to give a lot of credit to director Edgar Ulmer, a staple of B-movie flicks who sculpted his stories in fog and darkness to make up for the lack of sets. In fact, since they were able to use pre-existing sets from another movie, this is one of his bigger budget films. There's a lot to be said about Ulmer, and a lot has been said. I won't go into too much here, but I do recommend Scorsese's doc on the man. That's how I heard about him. Basically, he was a vastly talented director who made damn good movies on shoestring budgets. But due to the nature of the Hollywood system, since he got the stink of the B movie on him, he was never able to bat for the majors. Oh well. But in the meantime, he mastered the use of negative space to create his own style. I mean, check out Detour. That practically defined film noir. Yeah, I guess talent is as talent does, and I'm sure he would have made something which would have wowed us, but I can't help thinking that without the necessity, he would have dropped his house brand atmospherics for something, well, mediocre. And of course, with big money comes studio interference, asset Val Luton, and there's more than one way for a movie to die. But if Ingmar Bergman and Orson Welles could pull off the switch to color, then Ulmer could work with a budget. He did a terrific job with The Black Cat, and 95 grand in 1934 money ain't exactly peanuts. But as fun as if and buts may be, we'll never know.
Force.